Ken Bowen, call this meeting to order at 6:02. And I have to call present is Richard,
Here.
Bill,
Absent.
okay. And I have down Building Commissioner Rick LeConte, and we have a special guest who's one of the landlords that came to hear what we had to say. So basically, I like us to keep it like an open meeting. We could probably tell you like informal what, on page, that plenty, how many pages ago this was. We tried to meet with you once, and then I think we had to cancel, and then somehow we couldn't get with you, so we met anyway. And what we thought would be the best way to do this was we put the two ordinances next to each other, and we went page by page. As we went page by page, it was just a little bit more confusing. So we thought, best bet, let's just write down our questions and let's get a copy of the rental registration. Because a lot of times it's referring to it and we didn't know, we've never seen it. So we wanted to see what that had to present. And it's nice that there's a copy of the ordinances in there. If you would like to have some help, I think Alex actually got this for us because most of us had the day jobs and couldn't get to City Hall. So Georgianne went ahead and made some comments on the application. And I'm thinking, okay, if she needed to write out what this is for Alex that just walked in off the street, if there is a new landlord, would they be able to understand this? So I will offer to you after we get through the ordinance part, maybe to either simplify it, make it a little bit more easier. If there's nothing, say, on this side, you know, maybe tenant on this side, homeowner on that side, just so they know what this is for, because I'm looking and it looked a little confusing to me. So I'm going to defer to the rest of the committee. Bill, go ahead and feel free as to what the questions you had, unless you wanted to have Rick explain the process to us.
I was going to ask that you would give us kind of an overview of what brought this forward and what it attempts to accomplish.
Okay, I can do that.
I second that.
Okay.
Oh, really?
I just say, I just want to make sure that, I'm on the, answering how you want me to answer.
I'm taking minutes, so.
Yeah. For me, there's when we took over the department, there was a lot of processes that were complicated and convoluted, and it made it very hard for everybody to understand what was going on, and very hard for the staff to follow through on the process. As I understood the rental registration process, the landlord had a half, and then the tenant had a half. So they got a fee from the landlord, and then the tenant came in, and they got a fee from the tenant. And then when they put the halves together and the inspection was final, then they did an inspection. If the inspection passed, they got their occupancy. And it seemed to me that there was a lot of people that had to keep coming to the window. Every tenant, not only landlords, but every tenant. We have 2,000 tenants coming to that window, and then going to finance and getting the checks and getting the money. It just seemed an overwhelming amount of people walking through that building department for rental registration. And from my standpoint, rental registration and rental apartments, that's just one area that the building department has to deal with. We have several things that we have to deal with on a daily basis, and that one process was taking up half of their time. So my thought was, okay, let me put together something that would simplify, at least in a few steps, what goes on. There was penalties if the landlord paid his half and the tenant didn't pay their half, and the tenants and the landlord would say, look, I paid all my halves and then the tenant didn't pay their half and now you're penalizing me. And we had Ron Fogel in here, and the law department was bringing him in and wanting to penalize him, and he had paid, he proved he had paid everything.
And he called everybody.
There was a preponderance of information that wasn't getting followed through because we laid off all our staff.
Right.
So I took a look at this and I said, okay, here's what I want to accomplish. I want to simplify this thing. And my thought was to, A, make one form. one form that we give to the landlord. The landlord would fill out everything and pay both halves of the fee, whatever that fee is. So there's one form that goes to the landlord. Now, what the landlord would do when he had a change of occupancy or he had a vacancy, typically, I was hoping that the landlord would come in when his unit went vacant and apply. Pay the fee for him and the potential tenant, get it all paid for upfront. Then schedule his appointment, because our scheduling is what he's done. Schedule his inspection. He'd fill out everything, and in that packet would also be the tenant's portion in the RETA form.
Mhm.
Okay? So he'd get a packet with his part, the tenant's part, and the RETA form for the tenant. Okay? So now he's got everything. He schedules his inspection. When he passes his inspection, we give him a past inspection report. Here you go. You passed your inspection. Now you're waiting for a tenant. When you get a tenant, you mail back in your RETA form for your tenant and your past inspection form, and we mail you back your occupancy. No one comes to the window.
Awesome.
So you come in one time, you get your packet, you fill it out, you pay your fee for that unit, you schedule your inspection. When you pass your inspection, we mail you your past inspection report. When you get a tenant, you fill out their RETA form, you send the past inspection form back with the RETA form, we mail you back your occupancy. See you next change of occupancy. Done.
And you're putting the onus on them for the honesty to come back upon vacancy, or,
Well, let's talk about that.
because we don't have the police power for that.
Well, we have right now, if they re-register every year, there's no penalty.
Mhm.
But and there's no fee. So they're re-registering every year in November or December, whatever it is,
By the end.
by the end of the year. And if they bring in all this paperwork, there's no fee for being late.
Mhm.
So we're handling all this paperwork at no charge, because we're not charging them a fee. So we have all this paperwork coming in from all these 2,000 units, our people have to handle it all, and they're not getting any money for it. So what do we do? And I don't have
And
the
you don't have to
inspectors.
inspect them anyway if they're just
Correct.
re-registered.
Right, and no one's policing it anyway.
Mhm.
So my thought is we kill that. You get a change of occupancy, you let us know, we'll inspect it. We're not catching anybody anyway, folks. I don't have any people. So it is an honor, it's more of an honor system, but they're an honor system now. You know how many renters are out there that we don't know about?
Right.
Now, the key to this legislation working is the cooperation from the school superintendent. Because the school superintendent should have the license to occupy for every unit before they allow the children into the school system. That cooperation is key.
Well, that's been a long time coming. I mean, that's, I don't mean a long time coming, but when I worked in the building department, we needed to do that.
Right, and that's an accepted policy, but I don't know how thoroughly it's enforced by the school. So my thought was, if we get this passed, I will have a conversation with the school superintendent to make sure he's on board and his administrative staff is on board. So, okay, you're a renter in Maple Heights, show us your license to occupy, and then you're in. Then you can put your kids in the school system. That's our only leverage for him to get the inspection, for him to make sure that that they've complied with the rental registration and they have legitimate tenants. So that's leverage that we use in many municipalities, by the way. It's not something that's new. We're in 12 different municipalities as a company, and every one of them uses that leverage. So, but it requires cooperation.
And thus far, what is the relationship with, have you ever, or, let me ask this, have you ever reached out to the schools? And what have they?
No.
No, not yet.
I have not. Well, from what I understand from the previous building department staff,
Mhm.
because they didn't have the opportunity to speak with Paul when we took over, that this was ongoing as they're asking for that now.
The schools used to ask, the schools at one time came to the building department because of the influx of kids that were coming into the school system that they thought lived in Cleveland, but
Mhm.
claimed a Maple Heights address.
Sure.
So the building department in turn did the occupancy type inspection to go through the house, and they only looked for safety, and it was only smoke detectors and where is his child sleeping, and making sure there was no basement bedrooms and egress and windows, and that was basically it. But we had to prove that there was a place for the child to sleep, and they actually did live there, rather than they were coming from Cleveland and just being dropped off at the school.
And I think we can have discussions about the breadth and depth of inspections.
No, I'm not saying to do that, I'm just
But
saying
we
that's
can-
what we did when I
yeah,
worked
Yeah,
here.
we can have those conversations. I think we gotta take this by steps.
Oh, yeah.
And let's try to get this process streamlined,
Mhm.
so that it's easier for the landlord, easier for the tenant, and there's less people walking in and out of that building department, because we're not keeping up the paperwork anyway. And then we can move to, okay, what is the breadth and depth of these inspections, and how deep do we want to continue going forward with, so that we can actually do the work that our ordinance call for.
Mhm.
Because right now, we can't. So.
I wish whatever you said was as simple as what was in here, because with us reading it, probably didn't tell your story.
That was the whole idea.
Yeah.
On the third page here, it's O2, paragraph B, outlines the rental registration packet, says what it shall contain.
And
Are you on the old one or are you on the new one?
I'm on the one with the strikeouts, but it's 148602,
okay, let me go back to that.
148602.
B?
B.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, the rental registration package shall contain all necessary forms and information required by the building department. This is what you're talking about, having it all in one collective whole.
Mhm.
And
Is
says,
this? I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. So it's
No,
not
that's
this?
not that.
Okay.
okay. So all of the information required by the building department will be in that, including registration forms for the owner, agent in charge, and prospective tenants. Now, the owner and agent in charge can be the same,
Sure.
one and the same. Okay. So this is the description of getting it all in one package
Right,
to hand to one person.
the owner,
Yeah.
and the onus is on the owner. So Mr. Landlord comes to the building department, and we can give them several packages.
Mhm.
You know, we can give them 20 of them. Here, how many units you got? Here's 100. You know, how many got, 10 at a time, and they can fill them all out, and then when they want to send in the check, schedule the inspection, send in the check, and,
Uh-huh.
you know, so we're trying to, second thing I'd like to do is get this online.
Oh, absolutely.
Get this whole packet online,
They can
so
just
that then
download
the
it.
owners can do this online, mail in the check, schedule the inspection.
Mhm.
See, so that's another step that we could take, get this online for them, and then the owners don't have to come in even for that. They can mail in their packet, mail in their check, schedule the inspection, keep it simple.
In paragraph H,
H? Go ahead.
it lists 3 separate charges or fees.
Okay.
We actually didn't find how much the inspection fee was.
Mhm.
I think the registration fee is $75 and the fee for the tenant license was $50.
Right.
So what is the amount of the inspection fee? Could you explain these 3 fees, I guess?
I believe that's it. It's 75 to the owner, 50 to the tenant, and that's it. That covers the inspection.
Okay, because it lists 3 separate fees in here.
Let me see. H, let me read it, okay. Inspection fee for the unit, the rental registration fee, and the fee for the tenant license. Okay, now to my knowledge, again, my administrative assistant handles that. There's only 2 fees. Maybe the landlord can help us. Do
They
they?
pay $75, well, we used to pay $75 when we scheduled the inspection.
Mhm.
And then after the inspection, you came in and paid $50 for the.
The tenant paid that.
The tenant paid it for
So,
his
yeah, so
registration.
that's all
That
I
was
think
it.
the fees
Uh-huh.
are.
A total of
Yeah.
125.
Yeah, $125 per unit, yeah.
Correct. I don't know what the third fee would be or what, Let me read it again. General inspection.
Because that's all
Inspection
new.
fee for the rental unit, rental registration fee, and the fee for the tenant license.
It sounds like there's 3 fees.
Sounds like there's 3
We
fees
were-
to me too. I'll have to clarify for that. for you.
Yeah.
I'll have to do that for you. And I can, I'll follow through with that on Monday, you know.
Which is
Mhm.
great, because this is on the agenda for second reading on Tuesday. Not
Yeah.
that we're
Yeah.
trying to move it, but we'd like to get it out of committee so we could vote for
Sure,
it.
sure, yeah. And I think that's a nuance, but I want to have one fee, you know, compared,
Yeah, that's-
one fee that covers everything.
Yeah.
Here you go, landlord, pay this up front, boom, whatever it is. And I'll have to look back at, you know, what, remember, and God bless Kathy Younger, she put this together for me, using language that she wanted to present to council in a legal way.
Mhm.
She missed.
So she might have,
Well-
you know, changed the nuance in it.
So if you only want one fee,
Mhm.
then more than that's going to need to be changed. Paragraph F is obsolete if there's only going to be one fee.
Let's read it.
And paragraph G
See,
even
that's
outlines
the-
3 separate fees too.
Well, that $50 is the $50.
Right, but
It's
if
the
you're just
same
gonna have
fee.
one fee,
Yeah,
then
but-
why don't you just make your rental registration fee?
For every, right, that'll cover
125.
everything.
I think they're trying to
Well,
break it down so that the landlord knows that he pays this, but then he needs to get that money from the tenant, and he could prove to the tenant that there's a cost that the tenant needs to incur.
Maybe
If
that's
we
what
put
your
it all
point
in
was.
one, and the landlord says, hey, you need to give me $50 to move in, who said?
Right,
So
that-
this way, he could
it's
explain
broken
that
down.
there is a tenant license. Can I jump in? while
Yeah,
you're
the
on
tenant
that page?
license is, see, we can't call it an occupancy permit by the state anymore. Let me say that. The state, we used to use occupancy license,
Right.
but a building, once it's built, gets an occupancy license, it's
Yeah.
called in the state. These are rental licenses.
Yeah.
So that's why that language is in there. I required her to change that, and maybe she's breaking it down so that there is a separation of fees, but the landlord is responsible for all of them. And that was the intent. It's, you know.
It seems like if you just want one, then let's just make it one. Then only one check comes in, it doesn't come in with 2 separate checks and.
Well, that's
you know
what
I
we're
mean?
expecting, yeah.
So.
Yeah,
then
so
we'll have-
maybe we say it's one fee that includes this, this, and that.
Well, we already outlined the 3 separate things that are required in or the 2 separate things that are required in the packet. One of which is filled out by the landlord, and then once they have the prospective tenant, that part is filled out. So those 2 parts are already outlined. So you could have one fee paid for turning in all the documentation, you know, whenever you receive the documentation.
And then the license just comes. I didn't expect another check to come. I'm talking, when we set it up, it was $125 that covered the registration, the inspection, and the tenant license.
Yeah,
And that was the fee. And that was that, because that's all we're
So
getting now.
maybe we need to say registration and inspection, not registration, comma, inspection, comma, because that's where I think we're getting
Mm-hmm.
3 different topics, and to include the registration with the inspection.
Yeah.
Is tenant license and rental license both the same thing? Because she goes back and forth in this, and that's another thing that we weren't
That's
trying to figure out.
It has to be the same thing, because.
Then that needs to be in the definitions, or we need to just keep it all one same word? We need to all call it.
Let me see, let me, F
F
says,
has tenant license.
for the tenant license, see, she
G
got that in
has-
quotations.
G has tenant license,
Yeah.
but then when you go to I, it's also in quotation marks rental license. So we were trying to figure out what's the difference between the 2. I think they're synonymous.
Yeah, I think they are too. The rental registration is the owner's, you know, that's their responsibility normally. You know, you have to register all your tenants. The license really is for that tenant to occupy. So that's all it is. It's a rental, it's a license to occupy by the tenant, and it's a registration have by the owner.
Mhm.
That's all that is,
So we need to have that language,
cleaned up.
yeah, or,
It needs to be uniform.
yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
So it was just things like that that was pretty much we were hung up on.
Sure, and
because
I get it.
we weren't sure,
Mhm.
so it wasn't anything against the
Yeah.
process of what you're trying to
Ken-
do.
I think Kathy's trying to, she's trying to be really careful and get everything in there, based on the ordinances. I think sometimes that muddles it a little, a little bit more than it should.
So then I, it's a rental license, and then when you go back to J, then it's called a tenant's license. So
Mhm.
just try to be a little bit more,
Yeah, it's gotta be all that.
you don't want to.
Yeah, it's gotta be uniform.
Yeah,
It's,
and
it's
then,
a rental license.
and then we have tenant license in just the topic of tenant license, which is right underneath your thumb.
Right.
So that gets a little, I don't care what you call it, but
Yeah. the-
rental license,
Yeah. It's a
probably
rental
more
license, yeah.
appropriate tenant license
Right.
just sounds a little bit. So is this for residential and commercial?
Yeah.
But you do understand that that is actually for the tenant, not for the rental unit. So tenant license almost does make more sense.
It's for the unit, not for the tenant,
No.
because the tenant's applying to live in the unit, but we're giving the license that it's okay for them to be
Yeah, I don't
there.
care what the tenant is. The tenant needs to supply the RETA form.
Yeah,
This license is for the tenant, yes, but it's a rental license for unit 201A.
mhm.
That's legal occupied. And we give them that license for that space, period. So it's per unit. I don't care who goes in there. You're going in there, I'm getting your RETA form, and that's just for the tax people. I really don't care. See, from my purview, I don't care who's in there. I don't care who's in there. I don't care what the tenant is. I just want to make sure it's a legal unit, and they're paying their fees to get it inspected, and when it changes of occupancy, I got compliance for the building code. My concern.
Well, exactly, and it's a safe unit for anybody to reside in,
Yeah, I don't care who
regardless
it
of who
is.
it
Yeah,
is.
the RETA form, really, that's for the tax people. You understand, from my position, I don't care who they put in there. The person, that body doesn't matter to me. This is, I got a landlord,
So you're giving them the right to actually have someone occupy the property or the unit.
that unit,
So
period.
that license is a license to occupy,
Yeah.
not a license for Mr. Jones to occupy, because it could be, Mr.
Yes.
Jones isn't
Yeah.
gonna take that with him to
Right.
another unit, like a voucher,
And-
and be okay with that.
Yeah, but once they give me that RETA form, no one else can be in that unit until they re-inspect.
So it actually is tied to the tenant.
It is tied to the tenant in
Yeah.
that regard. I'm thinking through this. It's tied to the tenant in that regard. Once they give me the RETA form, they have, if they get another tenant in there, they have to get another inspection. So it's on change of occupancy. So it is tied to the tenant. So in that regard, I guess we could call it a tenant license. Rental license, they're interchangeable, but what do you think's the best language to use then, guys?
Well, the question for me is you're the building department, you're not the finance department.
Right.
So we want to at least be aware that we are cross-pollinating here because we're asking for their RETA documentation through the
Right.
building department.
Correct.
So, I mean, we are cross-pollinating. You are doing a little bit of the finance kind of side of it.
Right, and that's
For
really.
you, that has nothing to do with you really though, other than we've put it in here that you have to have a document that requires them to prove they're paying RETA
Right,
or registered with RETA, however it works. So I'm thinking as a building department, you just are there to concern yourself with that particular unit, has nothing to do with the tenant. You want to make sure that the unit is good to go for the tenant who's moving in. But we're also assigning you an additional duty to ensure that the tenant who comes in is registered to pay their RETA income taxes.
agreed.
So,
That's been the previous policy as well.
yeah. Is that the best way to handle it?
Yeah, because otherwise,
Because it's all in one application.
how do you prove, otherwise, okay, units, how do you prove the tenant? How do you prove tenants are in there? How does finance get a hold of the tenants it's always been part and parcel. They've been married forever, that process. I've never thought through it in those terms because it's always part of the process. Shows the tenant. Now, we were gonna ask that they actually made a copy of the tenant's license and gave us a copy of the tenant's license with the application. That's done another.
Oh, driver's license?
Driver's license.
Okay.
We're gonna ask for a tenant's driver's license as part of the process when they turned in the reader form.
Mhm.
Well, Mr. Fogel made a good point. He says, you know, if we turn somebody down and we have their driver's license, it can be misconstrued as redlining. So he was real worried about the legalities of that, asking for a driver's license. So we settled on just the reader form. We had that conversation. We wanted to know who was in there and prove who was in there, so,
Mhm.
Well, why does it say that the tenant completes this section and they need the tenant's ID? What ID do they want then?
that's the old form.
the old
Yeah,
form.
we haven't touched the forms yet, you know. We want to get what I wanted to do is get the legislation moving forward and then put together a packet, you know, so that we can look at everything in the packet and say, okay, here's the packet that's going on. Tenant portion, landlord portion, and reader form. You know,
Mhm.
that was the idea.
I think in the future, things like that should be done prior, because it helps in this process to see what exactly is happening. And it shows that there's gonna be follow-through, because there's been things in the past, oh, we're gonna do such and such, such and such. Well, am I gonna come back and babysit you and make sure that you've got everything?
No, I hear what you're saying, but that's, you know, this is just something I'm fleshing out. And there's been a lot of things that I've put out that have been followed through on the other end, you know, and I have the mayor to deal with and council. So, you know, I'm not the guy that makes the ordinances or passes them, I suggest them.
Mhm.
And if you guys are, you know, if you guys are willing to pass it, I'm okay with it. If you're not, I'm okay with keeping it the way it is. But for me to do all the forms and all the follow-up and all the paperwork and all the fleshing out before you guys even accept the idea, it's sort of, you know.
You could say that, but that would show that you have real ownership and real faith in your program, that it's gonna be successful.
Well,
A good idea.
well, that's easy to say when you have staff and you have people. I don't.
Mhm.
So I do what I can with what I got. And this is as best as I can do with this. And frankly, if it's not good enough, then I'm dependent on council to help me through that process. Because I need a team effort. I'm one man. So, you know, it's gonna take your cooperation as well and your help. And I frankly appreciate it. I just, this is what I did myself with no help. I think, you know, Kathy helped me with some of the language. But we can, you know, my thought was to get this thing going, and then we'll flesh out the forms as a second step.
Can you clarify something for me?
Sure.
Well, we're in D,
Mhm.
and we're just talking about the fees right now. And I'm looking more apartment buildings, multifamily, and
Mhm.
feel free to chip in, Eva. The landlord comes in with a $75 fee,
Mhm.
and maybe he has 5 units that are vacant, and he needs to have tenants in there, so they need to have an inspection. So it'd be $25 because, for each unit
Mhm.
that needs to be inspected, because you're actually going into those 5 units.
Sure.
How large is the largest apartment building that we might have? Is that Vogel?
Yeah, Foles, Hoffman.
Yeah, how many do you have in your buildings? Are you like
My
8 or
largest
12?
building has 20.
20.
Yeah.
At what period of time is your vacancy rate usually?
Probably anywhere now, probably around 10%.
So that would be not even one unit? I'm not mathematical. I was like, so out of 20, so you have like maybe 2 vacant each time that you would need to come to
In
get
one,
the
that
inspection?
particular building, yeah.
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 That followed the existing stuff, I think.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering about,
That's
fees
even
that you have to
necessary.
cover. You have to cover, the time of, well, actually, we have to pay your bill. So I know, I was just looking to see if it was a hardship based on the number of units, and not that I'm looking to actually maybe put in a fee schedule, but I'm just wondering if for the larger units, if there could maybe be a decrease in the fee, just because you might be going from one unit down the hall to another unit, and you're not doing a basement, you're just looking at the kitchen, the bathroom, you look at the GFIs, you're looking at the smoke detectors, and I don't know exactly maybe what else,
The
you know.
minimum, the minimum fee in any of the jurisdictions is usually $35.
Is it, so we're low on that?
You know,
Okay.
that's even low. And that's a break, so just across the board.
So we would be
yeah.
charging $75. If you would come in tomorrow and you had your 2 units, we would charge her $75 for each unit, and then 25 for the, no, 75 for one,
and
25 for the other,
so
and
it'd be
then
$100
50 on
for two.
each.
No.
Right.
I'm sorry. No, the last time I was in, I had 2 units in one building, and I asked Georgette about that, and she said they didn't do the discount anymore.
That's now.
Yeah.
We're talking about this ordinance. This ordinance says 75 for the first, 25 for the second. So if you had 2 units, your end would be $100 plus the 50 on each, so it would be $200 for the 2 units.
Okay.
Everybody understand that?
Yeah, okay, good. That, I wanted to make sure, I didn't know that that was something that's new. These have been Xeroxed to death, and we have the old one,
Right.
we thought, and the new one.
Mhm.
And there's some strike-throughs and there's some highlights, but they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So this is basically kind of like, okay.
She's only been there, she came in with no training every year.
She was
did the
there
rest
for
she did.
finance, yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
You can't
So-
know all the ordinances.
She did, and then we came in after she did. And, we've been just doing what we can, what we got there, so. What, the idea of this all was just to get it moving forward. If you think there's enough information here to take it out of committee, move it forward, I'm all for it. If you want to sit on it some more and we clean up the language, I'm okay with that too.
Well, we'd have to clean up the language by the time we pass it, because if we pass it the way it is, and then it has to be revised, we'd have to bring it back again.
No, I get that.
So I mean, if Kathy could do something between now and, we could, talk about what's going on Tuesday, that there'll be a revised copy, and I don't know if people need to, like, review it.
We pushed it through to get it on a second reading in council. When it comes out of committee, does it have to have a second reading right away? Or can it be out of committee and then have a second reading?
If it comes out
the
of the
next
committee, I
meeting?
think it's gonna be on the agenda.
Yeah, so we'd want to have it cleaned up coming out of committee.
Yeah, see, I don't know how that process works.
Yeah, so we'd want to iron it out prior
Yeah, I thought when
to
it's in
bringing it out of
committee-
committee.
I thought when it was out of committee, it was just off the shelf, and now you reconsider and you make the changes from there. I don't know how that process works with council, so.
Well, it can be changed, amended at any time,
Mm-hmm.
but as it was referred to committee, the idea is that the committee will be able to flesh it out, get it up to par, and then
Then
make a
we would have to
recommendation.
vote it on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how the process works. I didn't know if the council did that or the committees did that. or
And
what.
see, Kathy has it on the agenda, but not as a
Yeah.
reading, from what I understand. I didn't really open
I
up
mean,
my
I saw
email,
it.
and she didn't give us.
It wasn't
in
an
print.
attachment to, so I don't know, it could be.
It's listed on the agenda, but
So once it goes in front of council, once it comes out of committee, you put it on the agenda.
It
It
would
has
be
to
the
be,
second reading, and then it would be passed at the next one.
what would be second
Does-
reading if there weren't significant changes?
And is the change, can there be changes between the readings?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make an amendment.
We,
Oh.
yeah, I mean, it could be
It's a
passed
learning
as,
process
it could
for
be
me.
passed as amended. So if we make
Yeah.
changes, it doesn't have to be totally all
Mm-hmm.
changed, but I mean, if we come
Mhm.
in on Tuesday and say, and we're all agreeable upon the changes as well as you are too,
Mhm.
we could say that, we could put it on a second reading as amended, but we'd have to have some language in there to show other council what's being amended.
Well, I guess what I would ask the committee is, do we have objections in general to the idea of this thing, what we're trying to
No, I don't
accomplish?
have any objections to this.
Not in general, what we're trying to accomplish, yeah.
I don't have any objections to this. So what are we going to decide in terms of language, because we have these different
Yeah.
verbiage for the
Mhm.
fees? So
I
what are we
think,
going to go with?
I think maybe a tenant rental license would be the language to clean up those two separate verbiages. It wouldn't be just a rental license or a tenant license, it would be a tenant rental license.
Before we even, I have a couple other questions.
Go ahead.
If we look at, it's section 02, paragraph J,
Okay.
rental registration, tenant license are not assignable transferable, shall be reapplied. With each change of ownership, transfer of title, and upon the change of the tenant in the rental unit, we understand that whenever they change tenants, that they'll need to come back. My question is, in other municipalities, how has the process worked of when you need to have another inspection? Is it always upon the change of a tenant, or is there sometimes annual inspections? Because all I'm seeing here is whenever a tenant changes
Right.
or a property sells.
Right, and it's a good question, and it's all over the board. And it depends on the municipality, the staffing, and the wherewithal of the community to staff the inspections and the registrations. And that's the shame of it. The more staff you have, the more processes you can have to more closely monitor the landlord-tenant relationship and their relationship to the city. The less people, the less monitoring. If we had the staff, I'd leave the old registration alone because we can handle it. So your question is a valid one. It's all over the board. Now, typically, when a building changes hands, they have a point of sale inspection. And that point of sale inspection covers the whole building to make sure every unit is covered. Now, from my purview, once you've had that point of sale inspection, that building's good. The only thing you should have to do is the rent and registration period, and it wouldn't need another inspection. You've passed the point of sale. So on a change of ownership, if you have a point of sale inspection, when what we're doing now is if someone has a point of sale inspection, new owner comes in, hey, I passed the whole point of sale inspection. All my units have passed. He should pay his fees, but it shouldn't require an additional inspection. You just inspected the guy. You shouldn't have to go out and get another inspection, pay the fees, get your tenant in here with the proper paperwork and go with that. That's the way I feel about it. And that there seemed to be in the past a duplication. You know, a guy would get a point of sale, then you get a tenant, and then you need a tenant inspection. Go for it. It's brand new, all done. There's not been an occupancy in between, so what are we doing here? We're not looking for a cash cow, we're just looking for building code compliance.